and we're ready to begin.
All right. Thanks a lot, John. Thanks for the intro, and welcome everyone to this second session on adaptive leadership and adaptive change. We're going to be going a little deeper into the humble conversation skills that I talked about last week, and hopefully having more time to practice them with each other. So I'd like to start out today with a reflection on the Our Father. Okay. So last week, if you recall, I started with some reflections on the Beatitudes. And the Our Father, I would suggest, is one way of praying by the Beatitudes. I think all of the 8 Beatitudes are right there in the Our Father. So what I'd like to do is start with an opening prayer that's kind of like a Lectio Divina, where we open up the Our Father in 7 segments. And I'd like to invite you to share your thoughts in a word or phrase or a very short prayer as I pause over 7 sections of that prayer that we're so familiar with, the Our Father. So why don't we begin in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. So any thoughts that you have that you want to share about those opening words of the Our Father? Just a word, a phrase, or your own prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name.
You are holy.
Grace to you.
Daddy.
Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven.
Be here.
Oh, obey.
Show me your will.
Thy will be done.
Love us.
Give us this day our daily bread.
Protect us.
Provide.
Sweet are your words.
Fill our emptiness.
Help us to trust.
Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us.
Give us your grace.
Fill us with your grace.
Mercy.
Forgive.
Unity.
Help us.
Open my inner box.
And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil.
Guide us.
Don't leave us.
Show us the right path.
Protect us.
Lead us.
Strengthen us.
Jesus, I trust in you.
Be with us in the most challenging times.
For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory, now and forever.
Hope,
Promise.
Humility.
Joy. I believe. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, everyone. The Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thanks. That was the first time I've ever tried it that way, praying the Our Father. I kind of like the idea of just slowing it down a little bit, right? Because at Mass, we say it every day, and sometimes we go through it with rote memory and lack of awareness and not really paying attention to the words. But as I reflect on the Beatitudes so often, I can't help but think of, the poor in spirit and those who mourn, and think of the meek and the humble. Think of those who are hungering and thirsting for righteousness, and the merciful and the peacemakers and the pure of heart. It's all the Beatitudes are right there in the Our Father. And so I like to think of, praying the Our Father as praying by the Beatitudes, praying by the Sermon on the Mount, if you will. So thanks for sharing with me your thoughts and your ideas and your prayers with the Our Father. So these are my slides. I'm gonna try to do initially, I'm gonna just do a little bit of a review from last week. So we talked about how the church and the world desperately need change. And because change is the substance, it's really the work of leadership. We need leadership to lead that change. And this is my definition, if you recall. The adaptive change is the kind of change I'm talking about here. And that's where you're changing people's hearts and minds. It's not just a technical switch that you can flip. It's not a simple fix. It's things like, how do we change our mindset to go from a maintenance mindset, which was, typical in Christendom, to a mission mindset, which is typical of the apostolic age that Pope Francis tells us we're in today. We talked a little bit about servant leadership, right? That the idea of being motivated first to serve. Then the idea here is that the motivation comes from the heart, right? And so because you are motivated by a mission or by the people you're serving, or you're motivated by the mission of the church itself, you see things that need to be changed, and you start leading change by influencing others around you to join you in a voluntary interactive process that would bring about some kind of adaptive change. Last week, we also reflected on the Beatitudes, a source of great wisdom for the Beatitudes. For example, the poverty of spirit, the idea of making yourself vulnerable, just the wisdom of making yourself vulnerable to open up to other people's ideas about how to solve adaptive challenges that we have, or the humility that it takes to admit to other people that you as a leader in the church don't necessarily have all the answers, that you need other people and you need the Holy Spirit to guide you and to guide all of us in the process of change. And just a reminder that when we're talking about leadership here, we're not talking about a position of authority. Okay, we're not just talking about a title or something you can be promoted into. Leadership is a choice. It's an activity that you voluntarily enter into with other people. And then another reminder that management or people in positions of authority can either create conditions for leadership or they can discourage leadership, right? So the people at the top in most organizations, including a parish, can either encourage or discourage leadership from emerging elsewhere. And then there's so much change in our world today, right? So we're going to be talking more about how do we adapt to the ways in which the world is changing. That's a good way to think about adaptive challenges, is just to ask yourself, in what ways is the world changing that the church needs to adapt to? Okay, that's not changing our teaching, not changing who we are as our identity, but changing how we reach into this apostolic world, this missionary landscape that we have to operate in today. Okay, and because the landscape itself has changed, the world has changed, our challenges are changing. They're more adaptive. We need more leadership and less management in today's world. These are adaptive challenges, are ones that require us to ask more and to tell less. Okay, and then after asking, we have to listen. We're going to talk today more about listening and how do we really listen. And really, it's about changing the culture. Adaptive challenges usually are all about changing the culture, which is basically the way we do things around here. Okay, it's our attitudes, our beliefs, our behaviors. All of that adds up to our culture, our mindsets, if you will. Okay, so if you have a technical problem, by all means fix it. Okay, managers can fix technical problems and should. Right? But the more urgent and important issues today, we're going to talk about what some of those are, tend to be adaptive. And because we've moved from the industrial era where problems tended to be more technical to the post-industrial era where problems tend to be more adaptive, we need to move away from telling people and instead move toward asking people. So that's what we call adaptive leadership, okay? I call it also leadership for the greater good in my most recent book, right? And adaptive leadership is really about how do we help our organizations adapt to the ways in which the world is changing. So another way to think about it is, how can we think outside the box? If the box represents, this is the way we've always done things around here, okay? Then, but also inside the circle, okay? The circle would represent the limits of canon law, of scripture, of our core values, of who we are as church. So we can't go outside the circle, but there's a lot of room, I would suggest, that's outside the box and yet inside the circle. So adaptive change requires dialogical leadership, moving away from just commanding and controlling and telling people what to do, which only, according to the research, gets you compliance, right? So dictatorial use of authority can get you compliance. People will do what you say. But if you want collaboration, if you want engagement, if you want people to be inspired and feel intrinsically motivated to be a part of something, you have to try a different approach. And we're going to talk today about what are some of those approaches. And I would suggest one of the main things here is what we call humble inquiry. Okay, this book by Edgar Schein, a little bit more about what is humble inquiry. So first of all, it's based on curiosity. If you want other people to be open to your ideas, one of the best ways to get there is to be open to theirs, okay? You can do that by asking open questions, by being genuinely curious about what the other person thinks about a problem that we might be having, okay? And then, just bringing your mindfulness, your active presence to the conversation in the same way that we need to practice mindfulness when we're at Mass, right? Instead of letting our minds wander into all different directions while we're at Mass or while we're at Eucharistic adoration, we need to bring that to our conversations, that same sense of mindfulness, okay? And asking these kinds of open questions. It's also based on humility, all right? Which basically humility just means being fully human. Okay, it's the same word. Humans are from the earth. Humility is being down to earth. It's about recognizing your own human strengths and your own human weaknesses. Knowing yourself honestly and openly, this is who you are. These are your gifts and talents, and here are the areas where you need other people. And that's always the case in leadership. We always need other people to get things done. The really important things that we need to solve, you can't do by yourself. Okay. And when you're doing stuff by yourself, that's not leadership, because leadership has to involve other people. It's a collective activity, not an individual one. And then finally, empathy. Okay. Have to bring empathy to these conversations. It's not just about knowing what they think, it's about being able to recognize what they're feeling. Okay. What are their emotions telling them? Okay. And emotions and feelings are a little bit different. So emotions is basically the chemical reaction inside someone's body. And you can pick up on that because we have what we call mirror neurons in our brain. Okay. Mirror neurons are ways that we mirror the emotions in a room. Okay. And the higher your position of authority, the more people mirror your emotions. Okay. So we call these mirror neurons in our brain, that basically when everybody else is sad, you know, you're at a funeral and people start crying, it makes you feel sad. You're at a movie and everybody's laughing, it makes you feel more joyful. Okay. Those are your mirror neurons in action. So your mirror neurons are what we bring to these humble conversations, where you try to take on the pain that someone is expressing to you. Try to identify with their frustration. Okay. And we can do this by making reflective probes. A reflective probe is simply something like, that sounds really frustrating, or I can see why you're sad about this, or wow, that's really exciting news. All right. Those are 3 examples of what we call reflective probes. You're simply reflecting back the emotion that you hear in a conversation. And this is a way that we really connect with another person emotionally. It's also a way to encourage the other person to become more self-aware of their own emotions, which research shows when you're identifying a negative emotion, like someone's really angry or someone's really afraid, it lowers the neurological chemical reaction inside their body by about 40%. Okay. So these reflective probes are really a powerful tool for conversations. And then after you've asked these questions, you listen. And I would suggest that the type of listening we're talking about is generative listening. All right. So if you just look at this scale here, we all start our listening usually with a biased perspective. You know, we can only be objective to the point that we are aware of our subjectivity. So until we're aware of our biases, we can't truly be objective about what we're hearing. So be aware of your biases is the first thing. Get rid of distractions would be the second thing, right? Because we live in such a distracted society. So, you know, your phone distracting you, your computer distracting you, get rid of those distractions. Find a place where you can have this conversation without interruption. Okay. And if the other person starts the conversation, you know, and they're on their phone or they're on their computer, just, you know, ask them, is this really a good time to have this conversation? Because it's kind of a waste of time when one person's really not paying attention to a conversation. We think we're saving time by multitasking. We're actually wasting time. Active listening is where we begin to open our mind, our eyes, and our ears, so we can actually see you know, a person who's active listening. And I asked you last week, remember, tell me how you knew I was actively listening. Okay. You make eye contact. Okay. You summarize what the other person is saying. You ask open questions. That's all part of active listening. Empathetic listening goes just a little deeper, where now you're bringing empathy into the conversation. You're opening your heart. Okay. So in addition to opening your mind, your eyes, and your ears, you're opening your heart to actually feel what the other person is expressing to you. And then you're opening your will. Okay. And what we mean by an open will is that you're willing to change what you think and what you do based on what the other person has said. Okay. So if we truly bring an openness to a conversation, then we got to be willing to change our mind. Changing your mind is not a sign of weakness. It's really a sign of strength. It's a sign of humility. It's a sign that you're actually willing to consider the other person's perspective. You're actually trying to live in their shoes for a few moments and not only change your mind, but change your behaviors based on what they've said. All right. So any questions? Let me just stop there and see if anyone has any questions or comments based on what I've shared so far before I go into some of my research on adaptive challenges in the Catholic Church. All right, this would be your place to talk. Okay, so repeat definition of generative listening. So it's opening your eyes, your ears, your mind, your heart, and your will. You'll get those slides tomorrow, okay? It's those 5 things. Opening your eyes, your ears, your mind, your heart, and your will. It's kind of like, the statement of Jesus of, love your, to love God with all your heart, all your mind, all your spirit, and your neighbor as yourself. That's kind of generative listening, okay? Open all those things to another person in a conversation. That's what we call generative listening. Other questions, you can either put them in the chat or you can ask them. You can unmute yourself and ask a question or make a comment. This is a lot more fun when it's interactive.
I would say that this is all reminiscent of everything that we study in communications and what we should be doing, but a reminder that we're not always doing that.
No.
Too many times, I think, and this has been said, we listen to respond instead of listening and opening our heart and our mind and our ears and everything and really hearing what the other person is saying.
Yeah, thanks, Lucy. I couldn't have said it better myself. Yeah, we come into a conversation with our biases, with our mind already made up. We're listening to respond. We're listening to argue or to debate what they're saying. We hear a key word and we're off to making our statement before we've really listened to theirs. And I think this is what Pope Francis is asking us to do in synodal listening, right? Is to truly listen. We say that we listen, but we don't. We just don't listen to each other. Not very well. Anna?
He can up or he can sleep. Feed him up and let him sleep, whatever. Okay.
Anna, I see your hand is up.
Yes. So what I was going to say is that even, when you're with your kids, like while you're in a catechist, you're being a catechist and you're trying to get a message across to the even elementary or middle school. They're just there. They're just responding, right? They're not really having that active listening or generative listening that you're sharing. So it's not only helpful for us as the leaders, to talk to our teams this way, but also even how, if we can even help our children to have that generative listening to the Lord, even to the faith.
Exactly.
Very interesting.
For why our children don't open up to us, right? Especially our teenagers. I've been asking my students to record themselves doing humble conversations for the last several years, and they submit it to me as an assignment. And then I watch hundreds of these humble conversations and I give people feedback. And one of the things I've noticed that people do is they ask open questions, but before they pause long enough for the other person to answer it, they follow it up with a closed question. And I think we do this with our kids all the time. Like, for example, a kid comes home from school and we say, hey, Zach, how was school today? And before Zach gets a chance to answer how was school today, I follow it up with, did you get an A on your test? Right? Because what I really want to know is, did you get an A on your test, not how was school today? Or your spouse comes home from work and you say, hi, honey, how was your day? Okay. And then you followed it right up with, did you meet with your boss? Or what do you want to have for dinner tonight? How about pizza? Right? We don't ask an open question and stop. We ask an open question and follow it up with what we really want to know. Aaron?
I think it's interesting that you bring up teenagers because I work with teenagers primarily. I'm a youth minister. And when I started in this job, I'm still friends with one of my high school English teachers. And she told me I needed to read this book called The Emotional Lives of Teenagers by Lisa D'Amour. And what you were saying about like the different kinds of active listening and the generative listening, one of the things you're supposed to do that Lisa D'Amour recommends in that book is when you're listening to your kids talk, like they don't have as specific a language to talk about their feelings as we do as adults. And so she calls it like giving their responses like emotional granularity. So I thought it was interesting, like noticing the connections between what you were saying and also like I was like, oh, this reminds me of this thing that like I try to do with my teenagers is like, they'll be like, oh, I feel bad, and I'm like listening and I'm like, oh, it sounds like that's really frustrating, or you sound really discouraged about this thing, and so kind of giving them more language and tools to talk about how they feel.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. I think, giving our kids those emotional and social tools, right? And more schools are trying this. They're bringing social and emotional learning into the classroom. But we know that teenage years are times where the chemical reaction to their emotions is intense. I mean, this is biology 101. We know that that's what's going on inside their bodies. And so, we have to be a lot more patient with our teenagers and our young people. When I teach undergraduates these skills, I've had undergraduates tell me that just learning these one-on-one conversational skills has changed their lives. I've had students tell me that, and a lot of them have said something along the lines of, no one's ever taught me how to have a conversation before. No one has ever taught me how to have a conversation before. And having these conversations has changed my life. I have more friends than I've ever had before. These are comments that I get from my students, undergraduate students, mostly where I teach are graduate students. And we talk about the workplace, but the undergraduate students, especially the ones that went through high school during COVID, I mean, they're way behind on these social and emotional skills. So teaching these skills to high school kids, I think, is really important. But all of us need refreshing or reminding and learning along these lines a lot more, right? So what I want to do is we're going to practice these dialogical skills, I like to call them, in a few minutes. But first, I want to go into the adaptive challenges facing the Catholic Church, because when you go into your conversations with each other, I would like you to try to probe, what do you see as the adaptive challenges? So the subject for your humble conversations for today that I'd like you to practice is going to be around the idea of adaptive challenges facing the Catholic Church, okay? So, oh boy. And for whatever reason, John, my slides are locked up again. Okay, let me try this one. Yeah, this one's at least moving. Well, there. All right. Okay. So let me get caught up here. All right. So these were some of my research methods. Obviously, I've been praying about this and I'm trying, I spend time reflecting on this. I read the CARA reports, which if you don't get that CARA report every quarter, you should. It's about research in the Catholic Church. And I try to just listen to people. In the past 2 years alone, I've had 100 focus groups with people in parishes, parish leaders, and 300 one-on-ones, asking people about adaptive challenges facing the Catholic Church. I've also participated in our synodal listening in the Diocese of Davenport. And over the last 40 years, I've done strategic planning with over 100 Catholic organizations. And in strategic planning, we oftentimes are looking at what are the adaptive challenges facing the Catholic Church right now. So some of the things that my business students tell me are adaptive challenges, I would suggest, are the same things that are challenges facing the Catholic Church. So my business students, like I was teaching a business class in Luxembourg last year in January, and we came up with this list of adaptive challenges in Luxembourg for businesses, mostly bankers and marketing people. And I looked at this list and I thought, this is the same thing facing the Catholic Church. We have a worker shortage. We just call it the priest shortage, or we call it lay parishioner shortage. We call it a catechist shortage, right? Customer loyalty is an adaptive challenge facing businesses. We have the same problem in today's church. People are not as loyal to their parish as they used to be. We see people moving from parish to parish, depending on who the pastor is. In business, people are saying that we're looking a lot more for work-life balance. Well, I see the same thing in the church. I see parish staff who really overwork themselves during COVID and need more work-life balance. Business people are telling me that they don't see workers as engaged as they used to be. All right, well, we say the same thing in the church, right? Lay engagement is it's a huge adaptive challenge facing the church. And by engagement, we mean, are people intrinsically motivated in this activity or not? Changes in technology are, creating all kinds of adaptive challenges for businesses and for the church. Artificial intelligence, for example, is actively and dynamically changing the church as we speak. Generational shifts. Every generation says that young people are different than they were before, but I think there's something about the younger generation that truly is going through some shifts. And I think a lot of it is being driven by technology and by overuse of screen time, right? I see this in my own grandkids. Globalization is affecting the church and society, all kinds of workforces, right? Our churches are becoming more diverse. My recent research with Catholic Leadership Institute, we looked at 40 diverse Catholic parishes and how they differ from Anglo parishes. We see silos and divisions in today's businesses and in the church. Businesses are saying they're having a hard time recruiting and retaining top talent. Our parishes are having the same problem. So are dioceses, right? Finding top talent and then being able to keep people. Supply chain issues that they have in business. Well, if we were looking at locating the thousands of Catholic churches in the United States today, I guarantee you we wouldn't put them where they are right now, right? We have churches in places where there's no population, and we have populations in places where there's no churches. And business people tell us that their organizations are overmanaged and underled. I think we have the same problem in the church, right? Overmanaged. We have so much maintenance work to do, which is the work of management, that we don't have time to do the adaptive challenges, work on the adaptive challenges that need leadership, particularly in this apostolic age. All right. So these are some of the strategies that I've come up with, and I don't want to read all these to you, but some of the things that I would suggest we need to do a little differently. And these ideas come out of all these conversations that I've had with various people. One of the ones in the middle of this chart, change your meetings. Okay. I hear from people all the time that our meetings are boring. Our parish councils don't get anything done. Okay. They're not focused on mission. They're focused on the details. They're meetings to tell instead of meetings to ask. They're not meetings to solve real adaptive problems, right? They're meetings to tell us, give reports about what's already been done. I would suggest another adaptive strategy is to get smaller. We know that as organizations get large, they need to figure out how to get small, okay? Small groups are a great way to engage more lay people in our church. We all know this, right? So those are just a few ways that I think we can begin to think differently about some of the adaptive challenges we have, and to think more creatively about how to move from maintenance to mission in today's world. So what I'd like to do, like I did last week, is I'd like to demonstrate another humble inquiry, where we talk this time about some adaptive challenges facing the church right now. So let me stop sharing and see if we have a volunteer, someone who'll be willing to engage in a one-on-one conversation with me for about 4 or 5 minutes to demonstrate what do we mean by humble inquiry. So I want to give you another demonstration of what it looks like, and then I'm going to invite you to enter into one-on-one conversations with each other. So Anna, are you willing to do it? Can you put your camera on, please? Probably should have said that before you volunteered, right? John, can we allow Anna to speak and to turn her camera on, please?
Sure, she should be able to do it, but we'll make sure she can. Hold on a sec.
I see her hand up.
Yeah.
Anna, are you ready? Just turn on your camera and your microphone.
Okay, finally. It's not letting me do the camera. I can do the
Yeah.
microphone.
I'm working on it.
Should be
Oh,
a
okay.
place where it says stop video. Just click on that.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, I'm doing it, but it's not, I
Oh.
don't have permission.
Well,
You don't have permission.
sorry about that, but you should.
Yeah, it says meeting is in focus mode, John. Okay, well, while John works on that, Anna, let's go ahead and get started, okay?
Yeah.
So, all right. So, Anna, thank you very much. I really appreciate you being willing to have this conversation with me. So tell me a little bit about your ministry, where you work and what you do.
I'm currently working in Livingston, New Jersey. I am the director of religious education of about 200 kids from kindergarten to 8th grade, in charge of the confirmation, the sacraments, of course, the first Eucharist and confirmation. Yes.
Okay, there's some sacramental preparation involved. Oh, there you are. Hi, Anna. Good to see you. Okay, it's a lot easier when I can see the face, right?
Yes, I imagine.
So Livingston, New Jersey, you're religious ed director, kindergarten through 8th grade. So you've got Eucharistic preparation, confession preparation involved in that.
Yes.
And I'm assuming the numbers bump when there's sacramental preparation involved.
You're correct.
Okay.
I have, a big amount in 2nd grade and a big amount in for 8th grade.
Okay. And what do you think drives that? You know, what drives that interest in those years when, you know, kids go through preparation for first communion or for confirmation?
Yeah, I've asked myself the same question. I'd like to understand what has changed in the parents' view of it, because it's always been this way. CCD has always been 1st to 8th grade, and I understand. So one thing I must say is I'm a director of religious education for just about 2 years, and before that, I wasn't even living in the States. So this is I come from Colombia, South America. Even though I'm an American, I've lived in Colombia all my life. So back in Colombia, religious education is in school. Even though the school might not have a specific religion or whatever, they do offer religion education on the side. So it's not from the parish. So I guess from the Latin point of view, Latin Americans think that they only have to come to the church for the sacramental years. But then the ones who were born here and who lived in the States for all their lives, I don't know. That really it puzzles me why they are only coming for 2nd grade, just kind of to fulfill, you know, like check that, but not really, because I guess my interpretation, they don't have that relationship with Christ, and they're not keen on having that for their kids. They're just kind of filling, you know, check, done that, you know.
So what I'm hearing, Anna, is that in Colombia, it makes more sense because the religious education is in the public schools, but you have this big surge during the times of sacramental preparation. You have surge in numbers all over Latin America, right? You know, access to the sacraments is so hugely important in Latin America, but you're puzzled as to why you're experiencing more of the same in New Jersey.
Yes, it is. It's puzzling.
But what
yeah.
you think that people just don't have that personal relationship with Jesus Christ, and that's part of it. You muted yourself. You have gone mute. John, did you do that to her? Hey, John. Okay, there we go.
Okay, yeah, we go. Yeah. So yeah, I guess my thought is that they don't see it as a necessity, you know, to have their kids really be in contact with their faith.
So yeah, I've heard a lot of pastors bemoan the fact that our young people are sacramentalized, right? But they're not catechized, they're not, and they're not being evangelized. And I think that's what you're speaking to here is,
Yeah.
so how do we help build that, what we would call the domestic church, right? How do we bring the importance of religious formation into the home for these families? You have any thoughts about this, Anna?
I've asked around and have my own thoughts. That doesn't mean that I know how to do it, but I do agree with you mentioned before, the small group. Like, really, maybe I have a heart for parents. I know that they have a lot going on in their lives, and kind of like faith and prayer and church is like, it's just another of their, many responsibilities or things that they know they should be doing, but they're just, so I guess it's a matter of priorities. But why would it be a priority if they don't feel that it affects them at all? And how do we even reach to these parents if it's not like almost one-on-one, because each one is so particular? So I'm thinking, or what I've heard is that small groups really, really are effective. How to do that? Not too sure. But the way that I'm doing it now is meeting with parents, like according to grades, and inspiring them, telling them, inspirational stories, and hopefully rekindling again the beauty, and showing them the beauty of our faith, of what it is to have a living God.
So what I'm hearing is that you're trying these small groups, and you see that as one of the ways that we can begin to address this huge challenge of trying to help people see the beauty of our faith and the beauty of our relationship with Christ. Anna, I'm going to ask you if it's okay if I open this conversation up to the others on this call and see if anyone else on the call has a question for you or a comment that they'd like. Well, no, let's just keep it to questions for right now. So what other follow-up questions might the rest of you have that you'd like to ask Anna in her experience with working with these families in New Jersey who are interested in religious ed, particularly when it's the years of sacramental preparation, but you see these big dips in the years when there's not sacramental preparation. Lizeth.
Good morning, this is Lisette. And I wanted to give a quick answer to Anna, because I am working as a religious ed here in Redondo Beach in California. And we do have one of those challenges, where the families, sometimes they're not ready and the kids have no idea what is going on in the church. One of the things that we're doing here in Our Lady of Guadalupe is having the parents come in and stay to the class with the child, because we only see the child like 45 minutes every 2 weeks. The parents are with the kids 24/7, and we always literally preach to the parents. They need to learn and guide the kids. After they leave the class, we encourage them, talk about the class. What do we saw? How can we help you? Answer the questions. Our main thing here is literally preach to the parents, so the parents can help the kids. And that's how we've been having a little bit more success in the last 2 years in our church, because we are having the parents staying with the kids. And from the beginning, when we sign, and we have them to sign a contract online when they submit, are you going to be able and willing to stay with your child? Because this is not just like a dropout program for our church. It used to be in the past, not anymore. We have to have the parents to stay, be encouraged, have them to preach and teach to the kids.
Okay.
It's been working really well for us.
Thanks, Lizeth. So one approach is, as Lizeth is saying, is that they're trying at Our Lady of Guadalupe in California, is to encourage, or some parishes even require the parents to stay certain nights for part of religious ed. Anna, what are your thoughts about that particular approach?
Interesting. I I agree that parents do need a lot of evangelization as well. Most of them have catechism until 8th grade, and maybe after that, never again. So evangelizing parents definitely is a need. I never thought about it. Very good idea. Thank you.
Okay, all right, so that's a new idea for you, that maybe doing more to encourage or even require the parents to stick around. Lisa, your thoughts on this?
I think it works. And also all our materials are bilingual, English and Spanish, because we have a lot of parents that don't speak the language, and we provide materials on both language. Ana, I am from Mexico and my first language is Spanish. So reach out to me. I'll be more than happy to share whatever we're doing here in Our Lady of Guadalupe. And we'll be more than happy to share and have a meeting with you.
Go.
Thank you very much.
We're connecting and networking. Thanks, Lisa.
Yes.
I think there's another participant whose name is Lisa.
Lisa, yes. My full name's Clarissa, so that's why I go by Lisa. But something I have in my 35 years in working in the church have really, and I have worked with parents in sacramental prep, all of these things. And something I really, my question is that how involved is the pastor in formation of the entire church? Do they have a formation plan in place that they can involve the entire parish? I tend to think when we use words like CCD that we limit a parent's understanding of their own personal need for growth and formation, and don't understand that it's meant to be lifelong formation. So how do we help those involved in our parish life and those outside of our parish life to want to know more about what it is that they're doing in their faith life?
Thanks, Lisa. So your question, it has to do with how do we get the pastor involved in this process of recognizing that faith formation is a lifelong process. Anna, I'm going to make this the last question for you, but what are some of your thoughts about the pastor's role in religious ed?
Clarissa, thank you so much for that. Very good question. It actually you pinpointed one of the issues that we have. There is no plan, educational plan, like as a lifelong process. There is one for baptism. There's, as I said, CCD, right? And then there's for marriage, and that's it. So not a purposeful plan thought out for everyone or for every stage of life. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Anna. And I think that's fairly typical. So what I'm hearing is that your parish basically has a plan for baptism, for CCD, which is basically K through 8, and then something for marriage prep, but not a whole lot in addition to that, which I think is fairly typical of a lot of parishes here in the United States. Thank you so much, Anna, for participating in this humble conversation. I want to open it up to all the participants to basically evaluate, what was I doing in this conversation? What did you see my role in the conversation as being?
You were reflecting back what you heard.
Okay, reflecting back what I heard. Thanks, Diana. So yes, that becomes really important because number one, it helps you clarify what it helps give the other person an opportunity to clarify something if you got it wrong. It's also a way to demonstrate that you are paying attention, right? Okay. I also saw in the chat facilitating discussion, right? So once I opened it up to Elizabeth and Lisa, I was more facilitating the conversation by summarizing the question and then presenting that to Anna and then summarizing what Anna said. Okay, so basically trying to facilitate good conversation, right? Anything else that you noticed I was doing in this conversation? Okay, well,
I'm sorry. You
go ahead.
demonstrate to us what a good listener we are, or you are.
So I'm just trying to, I'm trying to do it my best. I'm sure there are things that I missed as well. But to try to bring 100% of your attention to that conversation and try to put away all distractions and just be mindful, be present to this other person, which I would suggest is a real gift because it rarely happens in our society, rarely happens in our world or even in our church. So let's practice this. All right, John, let's put people into breakout rooms, 2 people per room. And here's what I'd like to suggest. All right, so I'm going to give you about 5 or 6 minutes, and for the first 2.5 minutes, I want the conversation to go in one direction. So let's say, for example, it's Scarlett and Sister Margaret. So Sister Margaret might ask Scarlett to tell her a little bit about her work and what she sees as adaptive challenges facing the church today. All right. So Scarlett gets a couple minutes to respond to that. Sister Margaret's summarizing what she says, suspending her judgment, but just trying to really be open to what Scarlett has to say. And then after a few minutes, Scarlett turns the table and says, okay, well, you've really heard me, Sister Margaret, and my thoughts. Tell me a little bit about what you do in your ministry and what do you see as the adaptive challenges facing you in your ministry in the church today? And then Margaret tells her story and Scarlett summarizes what Margaret has to say. Okay, so that's the general way I would like this conversation to go. So both people get a chance to share and both people get a chance to summarize what the other person has said. Any questions about the directions for these conversations? All right, John, let's do this. Let's put them into breakout rooms, one-on-one conversations for about 6 minutes. So you have about 3 minutes to go in each direction.
All set. Dan, there's 1, 3. because
Okay.
numbers broke out. So room 1 has 3.
Okay. All right. So how did this conversation go? Anyone like to share either the adaptive challenge you talked about or the process itself? How did this work for you? Thanks.
Well, I never did clarify if it's a vet or Ivette. Anyway,
Okay. Thanks,
and we had some. She shared. I shared. She shared, but she also we had kind of a same thing, you know, with like parents not communicating or not being there, and I asked how she had some really great ideas about meeting with calendar, because we put out our calendar at the beginning of the year when things are going to happen. I teach 2nd grade, and then I'm also the DRE. I'm 8 years for 2nd grade, but just a couple of years for DRE. So I'm kind of.
Hi, thanks, Lucy.
Bottom. But she said she actually meets with the parents like during that first week with her proposed calendar. She does confirmation and allows them to kind of say, well, this won't work because my kid's going to have this and this. Now, you can't change everything,
Right.
but at least they have a communication. And that's a great idea because that might work for us. And another thing that she shared was seeing that communication between teenagers and parents, that sometimes it's lacking. You know, you get into confirmation, and she does she gives them homework, even though, you know, we don't like to give homework, but their parents are their first catechist. And so she gives them something that they need to do, but she doesn't call it homework. She calls it their apostolate. And so this is what they need to do in order to get to the sacrament they want to get to, and that they need to practice this. And so they practice it with their parents because that's where you have time to practice. And that gets some communication going there and their parents helping them with it. So I'm so glad I was teamed with Yvette. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Lucy. So I'm reading the chat line, and you're absolutely right, Mary Molly and others who are pointing out that 6 or 7 minutes really isn't enough time to have these humble conversations. Want to just give you a taste of it here online today, so that you kind of get the general idea of it. But these are the kind of conversations that we need to have with our kids, with our parents, with our pastors, with our catechists. Spending that time can make all the difference in the world. Yvette, you want to share directly some of the things that Lucy was just suggesting that you had some ideas that she really thought were helpful. You want to share those with the entire group? And am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Yes, you are, but I'm driving.
Okay.
So I will try to talk as fast as I can. So yes, she was having the problem that we all have, trying to compete with the sports in our religious education classes. So I told her I've been a DRE for more than 25 years. So I've gone through all of that. And the way that I kind of help our program and help the parents so that they could also commit with us, because it's not only us committing with them, it's like a mutual committing, is that to lay out the calendar and give them the opportunity to express themselves and say, well, maybe for the important things, and not everything is going to be able to change, but when they see the effort that we're making in trying to accommodate them, they will also accommodate us.
Okay.
And it's been working very well.
Thanks.
And then the other thing that I share was the apostolate. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I can't see. Well, the apostolate with the confirmation students that facilitates the communication between parents and students, because it's the language, but it's not that they're Spanish or English. It's the teenagers and parents don't speak the same language. That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Yvette. And that's such an important word, right? Apostolate.
Text message from
We're
2000.
living in these apostolic times where we're all, being sent forth. That's what the word apostle means, is someone sent forth, right? So we're all sent forth by the Great Commission to go make disciples. And this is not just Father's job anymore. We can't just rely only on the pastor to do this, or only on the DRE to do this, right? That's why, reviving that sense of the domestic church, bringing our faith into our homes is so important, because that's part of the apostolate. We're in these missionary times where we have to go out and we have to make the faith become alive in the families. So, all right. So it sounds like as if you've had some good conversations about some of the adaptive challenges facing religious ed these days, particularly how do we involve parents in the process of teaching the kids, and how do we combat this secular obsession that we have with sports, right? And that our parents are also, interested in our kids' sports, but they're not so interested in their religious formation. So those are just a couple of the adaptive challenges. I also saw that Lucy had asked for some book on adaptive challenges that you might want to read. This is one of the easier books that I would suggest. It's called Leadership on the Line. Marty Linsky and Ron Heifetz are two of the best known people on this topic of adaptive leadership. It might be best just to search their names on YouTube, and you can find some really good information from either Ron Heifetz or Marty Linsky on YouTube, where they talk about adaptive challenges. So that would be a simple way to do this, right? Or, you could also get a copy of my own book, Leadership for the Greater Good, where I try to put it into very easy to understand language, what adaptive leadership is all about. and the emotional and dialogical skills that we need for adaptive change. So those are a couple of my ideas, Lucy. All right, so let me go back to some of my slides. I have a few more things I wanted to share. Hopefully the slides will move. All right, let's see here. Nope, it locks up on me whenever oh, there we go. All right. So one way that you get at adaptive challenges in today's world is through strategic visioning. This would be one of the primary roles of your parish council. Every parish needs a parish council that's not just there to hear reports and make reports, but to actually come up with the kind of pastoral plan for religious education that Anna was talking about, that fact that, you know, her parish didn't have. So when Anna was, you know, from New Jersey was sharing earlier that her parish doesn't have a pastoral plan for religious ed, that's part of the role of a parish council. So, and this is my book on strategic visioning. And just to recognize that strategic visioning is not the same as doing strategic planning in a business sense. What we're trying to do is discern the direction that the Holy Spirit is calling us, and that strategic visioning in a parish council should always be rooted in prayer. In fact, I would suggest a great model for parish councils is you start with like a half an hour of Eucharistic adoration. It changes the entire meeting when you start with a half hour in Eucharistic adoration, or going to Mass together, and then have a meal together, and then spend an hour or an hour and a half doing strategic visioning, not hearing reports, not giving reports. But if you do those 2 or 3 little things, you can change the entire nature of your parish and come up with more of a pastoral plan. This is what a pastoral plan should look like, right? So, you know, it's about having a mission. It's, you know, being real clear about our vision, which is where are we going as a parish? I'm going to go more quickly through this and talk a little bit more about some of, let's see, let me go to, all right. So a little more about the practice of humble inquiry, okay? So, so part of humble inquiry is practicing vulnerability. And what we mean by vulnerability is to make yourself vulnerable to the possibility that you don't have all the answers. And you do this by saying things like, help me understand this, or, hey, I really need to know your perspective on this, or, hey, I really need to know what you think about this particular problem. Help me understand this from your perspective. Particularly when you're in a position of authority, and being a DRE is a position of authority, just making those kind of statements to your parents, to your catechists, can make all the difference in being able to benefit from their perspective about what they see is going on in your religious ed program. So just having the humility to lead with questions and not just with answers, and not just to figure that because I'm the DRE in this parish, I have all the answers, okay? And that when people come to me with a question, I need to immediately answer them. No, not necessarily. Sometimes the best answer to a good question is to say, what do you think about that? What do you think we ought to do? You know, so parents come to you with a concern about their kids. Well, what do you think we should do about that? Could be one way of leading with questions, okay? So leading with questions is one way of basically just showing our humility in admitting that we don't necessarily have all the answers. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't have a perspective, or you don't have any experience, or you don't have any expertise to bring this, but it means that you're always willing to learn from someone else. And generally speaking, after you've listened well to someone else, they're going to at some point ask you, so what do you think we ought to do? And that's when they are now receptive to hearing from your perspective. So if you're listening and multitasking at the same time, okay, then you're not really listening, okay? And we've got neuroscientific evidence that shows this. This is, by the way, this is another really good book, Neuroscience for Leaders. Based on my own reflections on what the church is facing right now, and what are some of the adaptive challenges that we face and what we ought to do about them, I would suggest the number one solution that I've reflected on is that we need to just place Jesus at the center of all of our personal lives, to take on what St. Paul calls the mind of Christ, to learn to pray spontaneously and to draw strength from the Eucharist, okay? And having the mind of Christ is part of that is just being ever mindful of opportunities to evangelize in our world, okay? Being willing and eager to share your love for Christ in the same way that I might talk about my love for a restaurant or my love for my favorite baseball team. Being willing to share in the same way about my love for Christ. And then being willing to go to the margins, right? As Pope Francis is asking us to. That's part of that mind of Christ too, is having the courage to go to the peripheries. Okay, and also having the mind of Christ means being empathetic toward the people we're trying to lead, or the people we're trying to teach, or our catechists that we're trying to help organize, right? So having an empathetic mindset toward them and understanding that it's not easy being a catechist these days. So it's being fully human by bringing that sense of humility to your ministry as a catechist or as a DRE. And then placing Jesus at the center of our church lives, right? So, making evangelization the priority. And almost all of our bishops are there now. And our pastors are also getting there. This is the Pope Francis moment, really, for our church of telling us that we're in a, that we need to become missionary disciples. We need to take the Great Commission very seriously to go and make disciples. All right. And so what does parish evangelization look like? Well, in the old paradigm, the age I grew up in, evangelization was father's job. It was the pastor's job. In new paradigm now, I would suggest, and I think this is coming through in all of our church teachings, is that we're all disciples. We all need to be missionary disciples. In the same way, we need to be all stewards and evangelists. We're all called to apostleship. So, we're called first to be disciples who come and follow, but then we're called to be apostles who go and lead, right? So this is part of the journey, I think, that we're called to as leaders in the church today. And then to listen with synodality. So this is one of the things we've been talking about, right? So listen at the margins. Listen to our young people. Listen to our young adults. They have something to tell us, all right? So if we really want to reach our young adults, we've got to stop and listen to them and what they're saying, okay? And I've already shared this, right? These 5 levels of listening, this generative listening of opening your mind, your eyes, your ears, your heart, and your will, okay? 4th, I would say we got to create a culture of love in our parishes. Somehow we have to exude the joy of the gospel, and that includes welcoming people, yes, and people on the margins, people who have not practiced for a while, people who are maybe divorced and remarried. We need to welcome the gays and the lesbians that, come to us. So this is about changing the culture of our parishes to have a culture of love. And what are some of the outward signs of this joyfulness of the gospel that Pope Francis talks about? Well, our celebrations of the Eucharist should exude joy. Our parishes should have newer, younger, diverse members of the community. So if we're really missionary disciples, these are some of the things that we should see. We should see authentic hospitality. We should see lay people who want to engage. We should see more people stepping up to be leaders. We should see a grateful giving of stewardship of our gifts and talents. And our hearts should be burning for social justice. Those are outward signs of the joy of the gospel. We have to rebuild the domestic church, okay? So we've been talking about this, right? So in addition to catechizing and sacramentalizing our young people, we need to evangelize them. We need to introduce them to the person of Jesus. We need to excel at the Sunday experience, okay? This is about being mindful when you're at Mass, being mindful when you're hearing a homily, being mindful when we're in Eucharistic adoration, right? Which the neuroscientific research is showing us engages the neurological connections between our hearts and the prefrontal cortex in our brains, right? This is what full, active, and conscious participation means, okay? And that's the language from Vatican II, right? that we need full, active, and conscious participation in the liturgy. And by doing this, not only do we strengthen those connections between the head and the heart for our liturgical and prayerful moments, but we're also creating those same neurological connections so that we can be more present in our conversations with each other. We need to communicate more boldly and more clearly what our teachings are, okay? This is Dorothy Day, one of the boldest and clearest people about Catholic teaching that I know, right? So, we need to recapture the narrative instead of letting Hollywood define who we are as Catholics. We need to define that ourselves, right? And let people know what's our position on gays and lesbians. I have young people who come to me and they say, why does the church hate gays? Why does the church hate women? Okay, I don't know if you've had young people ask you this, but I have in some of the focus groups and interviews that I've done with young people, and part of that is just, we're not communicating clearly what those teachings really are. We need to engage our lay people so that they'll be willing to also step up and lead. And this is only going to happen if we encourage people, if we invite people, right? We can't just wait back and expect people to volunteer. We've got to reach out. We've got to invite. We've got to go out, right? Engagement is all about stimulating people's brains in a way that, they're hungry. The research shows this, folks. People are hungry for a sense of purpose in their lives, which is mission. They're hungry for a sense of direction in their lives, which is vision. They're hungry for a sense of connection in their lives, which is community, right? These are things that we have to offer people today. We have so much to offer our society that is hungering for these things, right? So we can engage people in the deepest part of their brains by articulating a clearer sense of purpose and direction in the church. And part of that is changing our meetings so that our meetings become centered on our mission. Instead of having meetings to tell, which I would suggest about 70 or 80% of our meetings are meetings to tell. That's what we spend most of our time on, telling people what we've already done or what we're going to do. Or we have meetings to sell, which is where the people in positions of authority have already made a decision and now they're at the meeting to sell their idea to other people. Instead, have meetings to problem solve. Just put real problems on the table and say to our parish councils or to our commissions on religious ed, say, we have a real problem. We need to engage our parents in the process of teaching our young people. How are we going to do that? So put adaptive problems clearly on the table in our meetings and ask people to share. And then your job as a leader is to summarize, is to clarify, is to reflect, and then eventually to share your ideas when they ask you. Okay? Let our priests be priests and let the lay people manage. I could go on for an hour about this, right? But we have lay people who can do the managerial responsibilities, the administrative work of the church. And the same thing could be said for let DREs be DREs, right? So instead of just doing all kinds of managerial and administrative tasks, make time to be really present to your parents, to your catechists, and to your kids. Okay? And we got to heal our divisions. Okay? We got to heal the divisions in our church, which is only going to happen if we open ourselves up to synodal dialogue with each other. Okay? Those are some of my thoughts about what we can do, about where we're at as church right now, what we can do to try to reply and respond to these adaptive challenges. So I want to thank you for sharing these 2 meetings with me, an hour and a half each time. It's been good. I wish it had been even more interactive. I wish we could have all been present with each other in the same room. That would have been a lot more fun. But hey, given the limitations of Zoom meetings today, at least we've got this, right? And we were able to share some thoughts. Hopefully this has been helpful. I'm open for any questions that you might have. If you want to either put them in the chat room now or email me later, any questions that you might have. Resources that I've got I would suggest another good book to read is this book by Edgar Schein on humble inquiry. It's not that hard of a read. I would suggest, taking a look at that. And this is another good book that I would suggest for you. It's called Just Listen. It really gets into the act of listening and, the science behind it. So this is written by a psychiatrist. And then this is a nifty little, very easy to read book from the Center for Creative Leadership called Active Listening. I would suggest this is also a good book. It really gets into, just the art of active listening, of suspending your judgment and paying attention and being present to the other person, which I think is what our church desperately needs. Pope Francis is calling this synodal listening. And I would suggest that given the fact that the world has changed and we have all these adaptive challenges facing us, it's what our church really needs. It's what businesses need. It's what the churches need as well. So thank you all very much for these 2 sessions that we've had together. And we wish we had more time, and I wish we had more opportunity for interaction. So feel free to call me, email me, whatever. John, any last thoughts that you might have?
Yes, Dan, thanks so much for being with us in these 2 parts. And to all the folks who have been here, thank you for participating in this course. Next month, Sister Ruth Bollardi is doing intercultural catechesis, one of the big needs that came off our survey. And then for those who are thinking about volunteers and working with volunteer leaders and catechists, Jane Mondoy is doing the May course on volunteers, how to recruit, invite, and support and equip our catechetical leaders. So those are the next 2 coming up. You find those all on ncclcatholic.org. Dan, thanks again for being with us. Thanks, everybody. Hopefully we'll see you in April or May for the next 2 courses. Be well. Thanks.
Be well. Thanks, John.